Hello, everybody. Welcome to Narrative Live on a Tuesday night, a very special edition as we look at the verdict in the Chauvin trial. An unbelievable verdict, but really not that unbelievable because we all were expecting it. Can you imagine if it had gone another way? Look who's here today. What a great all-star cast. Nina Burley, the national journalist and author of an upcoming book, a book called Virus. How are you, Nina?
I'm good, thanks. It was a good day.
Yeah, it was a good day. And Noel, how are you? Noel Kassler.
I'm excellent. It's the verdict I was hoping for, so I'm happy.
And the man who's going to help us work our way through all the legalese here, Andrew Laufer. How are you, Andrew?
Hey, Zev, how's it going? Feeling pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, today was a day I kind of dreaded, I got to say. I was feeling a little bit like, I can't believe I'm going to have to sit and watch TV set again to figure out if their justice system really works, because that's what we've done so many times in America, right? You sit there and you wait for this verdict. You know what happened because you've watched the case. You're pretty much certain that the case, should have gone the way you think it should have gone. And yet so many times we've been disappointed in the past, but today was not that day. Today was a very, very different day. So, Andrew, why don't you talk about the significance of that? Because there have not been many cases like this in the history of American justice, really, where the right side has won when it's come to a police crime like this.
Yeah, unfortunately, there hasn't been enough of these types of verdicts yet. I'm hoping today is the beginning of change for that. A lot of it goes to how difficult it is to charge a police officer. I mean, prosecutors really do have a wide latitude, but a lot of times they're too afraid to put certain types of charges before grand juries and let them do their work. And then you also have, juries who just look at whatever police officers do or say is, the rule of law, and they're always right. So you've had a lot of that in the past, but hopefully, I mean, the evidence was just so overwhelming in this case.
What made the difference this time? Is it the videotape? Is that really what clinched it ultimately? Is the fact that so many people are on social media all the time? It's just hard for crimes to get hidden in any way.
Well, yeah, I mean, the video I think was what convicted him. I mean, I don't think there's any justification one could find, or the most deft attorneys could somehow manipulate that would be able to get around that. I mean, it was just so painfully obvious what happened here, and there was really just no other reasonable verdict to come to.
Mm. Yet they tried. They tried on so many levels, didn't they? I mean, they tried all these different potential excuses, and that might have given the jury some wiggle room in some of these charges. There were three charges ultimately they could have chosen from or convicted him on. They went for all three, so that's significant that they went for all three. They didn't look for a way out. There's no wiggle room in terms of this particular verdict.
Right. I mean, defense counsel has to do what they have to do. They're in a very tough spot. Some of the things they did I didn't agree with. But they have to do what they have to do to try to get their client, either his charges mitigated, his potential exposure to prison mitigated, the time amount that he's going to be there, or dismissed. I mean, you can't really hold too much of a grudge against them for doing their job like that. I mean, everyone is entitled to a defense, but the evidence was just so overwhelming. This is what I say. It doesn't matter what attorney you have if the evidence is so overwhelming against you. You're going down. It doesn't we talk about Trump all the time here and his cronies and what have you. And it doesn't matter who they hire. I mean, they're hiring half decent attorneys now, or decent attorneys now. Some of them are very good. It doesn't matter. It does not matter when the evidence is just so against you. You're going down. It's as simple as that. Jurors usually get it right most of the time. There's always issues from time to time, but most of the time, they vet the evidence correctly. They ask the right questions, and our judicial system works. There's not enough focus on how many times jurors get it right. It's always about, well, this guy got off, and why did he get off? And there are things that cause that to occur. Usually, all right, not always, but most of the time. So, today was definitely another good day.
It was a good day in terms of all of that. Now, Noel, I was thinking a year ago, which is really when the murder happened a year ago. It seems like it's a lot longer, but it's, maybe it's because we've been through so much in the last year. But, last May is when all of this started, and it kicked off a series of events, which are protests, stunts by the former administration, riots, other violence came out from this. It really sort of was a spark for what the Trump administration was hoping was going to be the way they were going to win the election. They were hoping they were going to strike fear into America's hearts by, worrying, increasing amping up the fear around the Black Lives Matter movement, around, the defund the police strategy, all of that. It's hard to believe that's only been a year ago, and hard to believe that that's what started everything. And I was just thinking about your man, Donald Trump, there in the middle of all of that, storming onto a protest with his defense secretary to take a photo shot outside a church, that was basically burnt out. But it just strikes me as that we've come so far from that kind of goofy craziness that we were in a year ago. And it's only just a year ago.
Absolutely. And Ivanka Trump putting a Bible in her, $700 purse and walking with her father over to have that photo op, and it played into his hands. That unrest was everything he wanted, because it sort of like emboldened his side, and look, the other guys are Antifa and they're going to burn down your cities. And of course, none of that was really true. And I think a lot of those fires were started by outside agitators. I mean, I remember watching those protests and the guys with the umbrellas, and it looked like a training op, and it benefited him, because I knew dudes on the Upper East Side come November, when New York City, for example, was preparing for what the election results would be, and they were starting to board up, stores and stuff again. And I remember seeing on Facebook people like, well, look, they're getting ready for an election result they don't approve of. They're not boarding up the city to protect us from Trump voters. And in reality, who rioted when they lost the election, right? It was Trump voters that attacked the Capitol. But his whole MO has always been like that sort of class division and racial division. So, it played into his hands, those riots. And as I said, I think they were ignited by forces, on the right.
I think so, especially in Minneapolis. I mean, I remember those first nights of protests there, where I think the police station was burned down, or it turned out that was actually created by anarchists on the Trump side, or whichever, on the right wing side. That they're the ones who started those fires, which was kind of stunning to think about. That's where the spark of that violence came from. In fact, you could say that throughout the entire year, Americans have been remarkably restrained, considering everything they've been through, considering where things could have gone from last May until now. There's been a remarkable, disciplined. There was lots of protesting, lots of good voting, lots of good, proper civil rights stuff, but never, it's amazing that things did not go out of hand. Can you imagine what it would have been like if Donald Trump was still president of the United States tonight?
If you're asking me, God, no. I'd be watching from Canada at the very least, if not Finland somewhere. No, I can't imagine what it would be like. Yeah. And thankfully, I don't have to imagine that world for at least another 3 years or 3.5 years. But, I'll say this one thing. I saw how Fox News immediately reacted to the verdict. And it was, once again, they were bringing up what I just said. They were bringing up, well, at least the country won't burn down now. At least there won't be looting. It's always an attempt to besmirch and denigrate minorities, the left, poor people, in terms of inner city poverty. It's always like those, those bad guys. And I'll say this too, I have friends who are on the job that that work NYPD and a lot of other police departments. You work with a lot of police departments in the entertainment business, and a lot of cops and stuff, and a lot of them are really good guys that want to protect and serve. But a lot of them sort of get indoctrinated into this. Well, you don't get it, man. You don't see how those people live. They're animals in those things. I'm just reacting the way I have to, and that's something, there's almost like a warlike mentality that overtakes these police officers. And I think it's interesting, like you said, it was a year ago, right? And there was such a common event, like the girl who filmed it was 17 years old. She was bringing her 9-year-old niece to get snacks at the corner store. It was a very normal interaction and a normal night in the lives of all of these people. And then abnormal violence was interjected upon this, and he murdered him in this pedestrian way. And that's where the outrage came from, how he was acting like he's sticking his hands in his pocket, and picking rocks out of the tracks of the car. He was casual about it. And I think that that is part of the reason it became such a watershed moment, because it was just average. There was no reason for any of this. And the guy who did it with this impunity, like, what are you going to do about it? This is what I get to do because I have a badge. And thankfully today we got justice.
And Nina, did you watch the verdict? Were you watching while the verdict came down?
Yeah, I did. And, my first reaction was like everyone else, oh, thank goodness, thank you, jury, because we've seen it go the other way so many times. And then, the second thought was of Eric Garner. And, here in New York, I mean, again, it was on video. It was unquestionable what happened there, and many other examples. So, it was a good day in that sense. And then, the other thing, when I got back on Twitter for a little while, and I saw, Cernovich and people like that tweeting about how the jury was terrified. They had to rule this way because they knew that if they didn't, there were going to be, this is the right response to this verdict, that they did this. I mean, I don't think I'm not watching Fox. I don't think they're saying it on Fox, but these people on right Twitter, what's left of it, are saying, oh, the jury just had to do this because they were going to riot. And I have to say, this is the moment really to start talking about how, you think that you just said that Americans have been very restrained. And I think that we have been restrained, except that in the last month or two or three, the number of massacres, gun massacres in this country, is getting closer and closer to every one of us. It's unbelievable what's going on. It's unbelievable. It's like the virus abated so that this other virus, this other terrible American sickness, could come surging up again. And, the point that I'd like to make is to the Cernoviches and the rest of them, and is that, do the math, man. Every single one of those massacres, which is, by the way, one per day, more than one per day averaging in this country right now in the year 2021. We've had more than one gun massacre a day, most of them by white men, young white men. Do the math. How many BLM protests does it take to equal one of those one day in America of a white boy with a gun? This is something that we need to, this morning, again, I jumped on Twitter and saw Pompeo. I like to follow him. Pompeo's on tweeting about how your Second Amendment rights are under greater attack than ever in history, and I'm going to stand up for them. I'm paraphrasing. What is that?
I mean,
obviously he's running for, he's going to run against DeSantis, and they all have to get as close to the gun world as they can. But I mean, what is that in this era of erupting out of control and really terrifying violence?
Well, it's the flip side, isn't it, of what we've been seeing? I mean, in the Chauvin trial, and there's so much fear built up on both sides. There's so much fear built up against what the supposed Black Lives Matter movement is going to do to your world, and what it's going to do to your suburbs, and how it's going to upend everything you've ever had. And then that creates the opposite reaction of, well, we've got to get guns because we've got to protect ourselves. We've got to protect ourselves against these marauding masses. And it's that construct that's been created. I firmly believe this isn't a constructed division that we are going through in America, that forces from the outside of this country are basically creating a division, whether it's through social media manipulation or whatever other weapons they might use, even some real life tactics. They're creating this tension for us, and we're sort of responding to it like it's a real thing because it's real in our lives. But the causes of it are not natural. They're happening externally from us, and that's it's really something hard to prove. For one thing, it's also something that's very hard for us to tackle in a way that's meaningful. And so I worry that the end result, or the goal that all these people are ultimately going for, I'll be as clear as this possibly as I can be. And I know I'll get yelled at, because a lot of time I get yelled at when I do this. But let's say there's China and there's Russia out there that are trying to destroy America. That's really their goal. I mean, for me, it's really hard to see that there's any other real reason for them to do all the things they've done, whether it's install a Donald Trump, or whether it's not tell us about coronavirus, or whether it's the endless amounts of manipulation around our alliances around the world, or you name it. I mean, they have not been shy about their aggression towards America. And what is that for? What is that for? It's designed to destroy America. Even Bitcoin. I was deluded into thinking that was a good thing, and then I discovered, well, that's also another sort of Chinese manipulation, or potentially a Chinese manipulation trying to damage the dollar. So we've got these forces outside that are really trying to destroy who we are and destroy our existence. And that's why they're doing all of this. That's why. And so every time we have even a conversation about the violence, or about the division, or about our race tension, we're actually in some ways giving into what they want, because they're hoping we amplify all of this. They're hoping we create even more division in our country. In fact, maybe the answer is just to turn away from it and start talking about them, because they're the real problem. To the end of the day, we're being victims of a mass disinformation effort by these countries, and it's causing. We tend to ignore it, or we tend to look at people like me who talk about it a lot like we're crazy. But neither of which are true. I think I'm pretty sane about this. There's a lot happening to us that we are not recognizing. That's part of this formula. That's part of what's going on. And until we start addressing it head on, we will struggle to get beyond these day-to-day issues that we have. We'll struggle to really understand. It's so unnatural for us to have a shooting a day. Do you understand how unnatural that is for any society around the world? It does not happen naturally. There's no way just specifically American men have decided suddenly, hey, we're going to go and shoot up people. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Why is it happening in the most advanced country in the world? It just doesn't make any sense. It's happening because they've been somehow forced into it, or controlled into it, or positioned into it, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to say. But it's not a naturally occurring phenomenon. It's something that we have to realize is happening to us. We're victims of this. We are victims of this violence. And it's coming from external forces. I'll stop ranting there, because I could go on for a long time. But if you want to jump in and respond to that, I'd be happy to listen.
These types of weapons that are being used have been around since the have been available to civilians since the 60s. You've had ARs, you've had Mini 14s, you've had all types of semi-autos, that can spew any type of caliber weapon. And, ever since Columbine, it just seems like it's just kind of gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse to where we are today. The way Nina described everything so accurately. What's the common denominator there? There's always been these types of weapons around. I mean, granted, we had the Brady Bill in effect for a period of time, which kind of lessened the availability of these types of weapons. But really, it just took off like a moonshot, and it's still going in terms of how many people are doing it. I mean, personally, I think a lot of it has to do with being, radicalized in some manner, primarily through the internet in some way. I have no idea specifically, but people are just being exposed to these types of, pressures maybe, that cause them to do these things. I mean, the availability of weapons certainly doesn't help, but I don't think
there's weapons everywhere. I mean, there's weapons everywhere. That's not really it. It's got to be something else.
They've been everywhere. They've been everywhere since the 60s, the 70s. You could go out, and it was much easier to get a gun in New York State back then than it is now. The restrictions are much more prevalent now, at least in many states. Some other states it's pretty damn easy to get a weapon, but there's something weird there. I mean, are they being radicalized by who knows? I mean, it's certainly possible.
Well, we know who it is. We know that it's actually. I mean, I know. I'm waiting for Nina to roll her eyes at me when I say Russia, but we know that Russia's involved in absolutely radicalizing people online. You know that they've been doing it on Reddit for years. We know they've been doing it on Chan4 for years. This is part of what that whole crew did with it. Donald Trump Jr. and his whole crowd. We had lots of coverage of that. We've certainly seen how the Proud Boys sort of came out into existence because of Roger Stone. We've seen the what's called the Oath Keepers, whoever they are. These are not These are things that have been intentionally created for us and for this moment and for this confrontation, which they want or someone wants. And whether it's the attack on innocent black people or black men getting shot in the streets for no good reason, or whether it's the random shootings happening in supermarkets, there is a incredibly traumatic event happening. And to what extent is that happening? Like, why do the people want us to suffer so much in America? Like, whoever's doing it to us, why is there so much suffering being inflicted on us?
Well,
I'll take a shot.
I will roll. Oh, go. You go ahead, Noel. It's your
No, you
turn.
go, Nina. You go.
Well, Zev knows that I don't agree with him on this. And I mean, obviously the Russians and the Chinese and the Saudis and UAE and many other countries and Israel are very interested in the politics and policy of this country, and they are active. They actively engage in it in some way or another. The Russians, but I got to tell you, a couple things. To say that this problem is an exteriorly created problem, to me, is just missing. It's problem. Absolutely missing the sweep of American history and the way that this country has developed, and the sort of elastic push and pull between the right and the extreme right and the left in this country, and anti-immigration movements and racism. And you can't tell me that the Columbine boys were Russian agents or influenced by Russia.
No, I'm not saying that.
This thing that these kids are into, this dark place, is not created by the Russians. It's got a lot of other things. There's tech. There's, the Iraq War. A lot of these people came back from the Iraq War to find their cities and towns, drained of treasure, of blood and treasure, just squandered and wasted on Afghanistan and Iraq. And I can tell you that as somebody who grew up in the Midwest, and I don't think that this is they may have, as we do, as our intelligence agencies do, looked for divisions and tried to provoke and expand them. But I think the problem is much more, it's here. It comes from within. It comes from policies that have been promulgated for decades by the government, where these cities and towns are left with no mental health care, no decent health care. There are lots of problems here, and you cannot blame it on the outside. I don't think you can blame this one problem on the outside. The radicalization of the right-wing radicalization, again, maybe they're in, on the internet provoking it, but I mean, look what happened to the NRA. That was ridiculous and it worked for a while. It was horrendous. I mean, I've seen the bots. I've been the victim of the NRA Russian bots.
Russia really did fund the NRA.
4,000. Right? Yes, exactly. But I mean, look what's happened to it. It's going down, but this will remain.
Well, yes, but I mean, the NRA is the people that funded the politicians which have been opposing any legislation against gun control for decades. They're the reason why that is still Russian money. Actually, that's maybe not the best example. But
in a minute we're going to talk about the corporations that still fund those legislators.
Absolutely. Look, I think it's an alliance of things. I don't think it's Russia on its own. I don't think it's China on its own. I think that sort of the masters of the universe, whoever they might be, whether it's the top 1% of Americans who happen to be white and Christian fundamentalists and they want to keep it that way, or you've built an alliance with these enemies of democracy. And the end result is the ordinary person in America is sort of we're in a ping pong wall. We're the ball being flung around, like we have no real control over anything. We're just like victims of forces on either side. And there's very little way for us to impact that.
One thing I will say is that, I mean, there's evidence that, at least Islamist radicalization has occurred online. And, the Fort Hood shooter is a good example of that. So I think there is definitely some of that going on. I mean, this is a uniquely American problem. There's no question in terms of the kind of violence that's going on. But I think, as you say, it's enhanced, it's inflamed, where maybe it's the goal of some of our enemies to inflame it or enhance that kind of thing. Nina brings up some excellent points as well. I mean, I didn't even think about that. And there was actually, there's no, radicalization can happen very easily with someone who's desperate, who really doesn't have anything to go home to, who may have a drug problem, or, a vet that has some serious psychological issues. I mean, that's certainly easy fodder for anyone looking to radicalize someone. So,
can I say one thing too on that? There's also been, like, I'd say post 9/11, there's a fetishization of guns and weapons that are designed to hunt people. People always had guns, right? There was always there, but they didn't used to have bumper stickers of their AR-15 on their pickup truck, and it became like ammosexuals, I call them, and people call them sometimes. It became this like social stratum of people, of young, mostly white men that like think it's cool to have all this stuff. And these weapons of war are very profitable. 50 million guns were sold just last year. These are guns that are designed to hunt people, not hunt deer, not go skeet shooting with, And that's what they're into. We see these pictures every day on Twitter of families all posing with their big rifles with their scopes on it. So there was part of it like came out in the open and made it okay to do this. And I think, your Clint Eastwood propaganda movies about, sheepdogs, American snipers or whatever, there was some element manipulated and interjected into the conversation from NRA and right-wing politicians that were like, look, this is what a patriot looks like now. He's armed and ready to defend the homeland.
Well, they were fed an entire conspiracy theory. I mean, they were fed a complete manufactured conspiracy theory that they had to defend the homeland. That's why they showed up there on January the 6th, because that they believed that to be true.
Absolutely, but I'm not even taking it that close. I just mean, post 9/11, I've seen this style of men, a military haircut, the sunglasses, the big militarized pickup trucks that are all over the roads now. I live in Westchester. I see these pickup trucks. It's like, dude, you work in customer service, in Parsippany. Like, what are you doing with the King Ranch version Ford? Like, you're on your way to Katona right now. Like, but it's
I got to get some dessert for the kids.
Right, exactly. Like, and that's how they go out. That's how they're pulling into, like, D'Agostino's. It's like, I grew up here in the 80s. We didn't drive that stuff. We drove Volkswagen Rabbits, and pickup trucks were Toyotas. Like, so my point is there's money behind it. There's money in over-arming people, in overselling them in pickup trucks and survival gear. And unfortunately, we have a world where that's an appealing thing for a lot of people. Like Nina said, and like Andrew said, the normal world has shrunk. A lot of the world doesn't make sense anymore. And when you're in fear, you want to take action to feel stronger and more secure. And in America, we have companies ready to step up and say, here, buy this truck. You'll escape when the power goes out and the roads go out. Buy this gun. You'll shoot your way out of this thing. And it doesn't work. It's that.
Everyone's painting the other side as
anyone's
the
ever put in a situation like that. I mean, I can only imagine how much damage one person could do like that if they're just panicked thinking that they gotta do something and get out of Dodge, when the shit hits the fan and, let's go up to my Alpine Redoubt, and try to ride it out.
I bet you have one, Andrew. I bet you do have it.
Noel makes a really good point, though, to bringing up 9/11, because I think, in some ways that is the source of the we underestimate or forget how it unmanned men. Like, what happened there was such an awful thing, that we saw our president in hiding, and then the day, like the trauma of that day, and then the ISIS followed by the ISIS eruptions in 2014, and I think there's this whole community of just, as it's fear, And it's that sense of being unmanned and having to match. I mean, you're talking about what you see in Katona or in Westchester. Up here in upstate New York before the election, we had these Al-Qaeda guys going up and down the road with the trucks, with the flags, exactly like ISIS, and beards. I mean, the whole thing, they had the whole ISIS kit. And they were like, running up and down driving up and down the highways, and you assumed that they had guns in their cars or their trucks as well. I mean, that's what they were doing. And I think there's, I don't know if anybody's done a real study on this, but I think somebody should really write a book about how the everything after 9/11, the security industry just exploded. I mean, that's where you get Rudy making all that money, right? He's a security guy, right? He could make millions selling his, he was walking through the rubble of 9/11, and it was all about security. And if you go to DC, like I lived in DC in the 90s, and I go back there now, just the amount of money, the federal money that was spent on defense and biodefense and other kinds of defense and national security and local security and security, right? The ocean of money that came out of 9/11. And it's, not just AR-15s in the gun industry, but the whole thing. And it's like a psychotic situation. I'm sorry, but I mean, it's very creepy.
Like with the anthrax also after that. And then
the bioweapons thing, this whole thing with writing this book about the virus, I looked into a little bit these conspiracy theories about Fauci and bioweapons. You know about this, right? So the NIAID actually was given hundreds of millions of dollars for biodefense. And so what is biodefense? Well, it's a bunch of scientists sitting around messing with things in labs that if they got out of labs, you wouldn't be too happy about it. It's it was tons of money. And it's American, this was going on in Fort Detrick and around Washington, and post 9/11, the whole anthrax thing, as Andrew said, they blew tons of money on anthrax vaccines. They didn't even need them.
Well, 9/11
somebody got very rich. There's always somebody getting very rich off of this. There are lots of swimming pools and McMansions that have been built on this security, this explosion of this obsession with security and fear of what's coming.
Because 9/11 gave us the war on terror. A lot of people are saying the coronavirus is giving us a new surveillance industry in terms of how people are being monitored in terms of their illness, whether it's these digital passports or these other ways of monitoring our movements or our body temperatures as we move around. I mean, it's almost
certainly true in China.
Yeah, it certainly seems like there's a whole new industry spawned out of the coronavirus. I'll just leave it at both of those things came from externally. But we'll leave that for now.
Yes, the virus did come from the external world.
So did 9/11.
Yes.
So in the midst of all of this, speaking about heightening tensions just for the sake of, political power, I guess, Governor DeSantis wanders into the midst of all of this with a anti-mob. Can you believe they're using the word mob as the other mob, not the mob that they are, but an anti-mob legislation, which basically restricts civil liberties. You can't really protest that easily in Florida anymore. And if you decide to protest, people could drive their cars right into you just because you're blocking their road. That's just one of the provisions of this new legislation, which is clearly designed to, I think, provoke violence. In anything, it doesn't seem to be like it's really designed to stop it. I think it's basically designed to really provoke a reaction, and that's why he's done it. Now, I know, Noel, you've got some pretty strong feelings about this.
I do. I mean, not just driving into crowds, which goes to my point of people on the right getting these big jacked up pickup trucks, because you might need to roll over some Antifa on your way back with the chicken wings, from work, right?
To protect the country, protect the homeland.
Right. Exactly. And I'll defer to Andrew on
Six-pack
this.
and some chicken wings.
Exactly. I had to roll over a couple of, Antifa on the way home back from Pensacola. But, also in that new bill is it's a 3rd-degree felony if you show up and they deem this thing unlawful, and then you lose your right to vote. So I think hidden in there more, you know, in a more evil way, it's another attempt at voter suppression, and it's suppressing the vote of the kind of people that they think might show up to, you know, protest police brutality. And you saw the cops, you know, when he had this press conference yesterday, they looked like
Insane.
central casting. If I was like, hey, get me a bunch of like no-necked Southern racist looking like Bull Connor cops, all right? Because they had 20 of them on that stage, you know. And the guy even made a comment. He said, and if you move to Florida and we got 100 people moving here a day, don't vote like an idiot like you did up north.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
He actually said those. Actually, I had that clip somewhere. If I find it, I'll play it in a bit. But absolutely. I mean, this was I mean, talk about a heightening fear for something that isn't even happening. There are no protests happening, but they've got to get the riot bill signed and they've got to get it passed just in case, you know, that black threat comes along the way. And just in case they block your road and just in case they block the beach, then, you know, then we've got all the power we need to make sure we can run them over. I mean, it's just, they are benefiting from this so much politically, and it's so vulgar, really. I mean, there's no other reason for them to be doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me, of course, you know, it's like you said at the top of the show, it's this division, and people are becoming masters at exploiting it. And DeSantis studied under Trump, you know, and he's like Trump. He's much more dangerous than Trump. Trump's an idiot, and he wants people to look at him when he walks in a room. You know, I think Andrew said this on Twitter. You know, DeSantis is Trump with a law degree. You know, he's not an idiot, and he's evil and ambitious. He scares the hell out of me, to be quite honest with you.
And you were saying that earlier as well. Or
well,
go ahead, Nina.
He's definitely the heir apparent to Trump, at least down in Florida. And I bet a lot of people are looking at him as the, you know, he's probably more likely to get that nod than a Tom Cotton or a Hawley or these other guys. Ted Cruz, they're all still going to be there, and they're vying. Pompeo, but I think he's the one that I think he's got it. He's going to get it, and you know, the Floridians are, you know, it's a no tax state, right? So that's why New Yorkers are moving down there. I mean, huge numbers of New Yorkers are leaving right now because the legislature and Cuomo are about to say to the very rich in New York City, you got to pay up. You know, the city's on its knees. Let's get, you know, they're going to try to tax them. And my friends down in Miami are like, every single apartment sale right now is to a New Yorker. They are Do they know
that he also passed $1 billion of new taxation last night? DeSantis did. In the middle of the night, he passed.
Maybe not. Maybe they'll come running back.
So maybe they'll come back. You know, well, I mean, like, you know, I mean, that is interesting that a lot of New Yorkers have left New York. I don't want to segue there yet because I think I'm going to land up in a different conversation. So, Andrew, you're going to jump in and talk about DeSantis.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's, as everyone accurately states, he's their rising star. He's the GOP's rising star, and you know, you got to keep an eye out for him. You know, you got to call him out, obviously, on a lot of the nonsense that he's pushing. You know, I don't think there's enough attention out there focused on him, and you know, like, he's got such a great response to COVID. I don't believe that to be true. I think there are issues with reporting numbers. You know, in terms of people who have, you know, passed away in Florida. There's just a number of areas, you know, that you can maybe look at with him, and you just I don't really see the kind of media focus on those things as I did with others.
Yeah, not yet in any event. Is it actually legal to pass a law where you can say it's okay to run over people who are blocking the road? I mean, that can't be.
No. I honestly see this as just political theater. I think it's going to get, I can almost guarantee you it will be challenged and it will be struck down. It's illegal. It's unlawful. You're turning human beings into felon machines, you know, in these trucks, and you can't legalize something like that while also violating a First Amendment right to assemble and to peacefully protest
and holding people.
There's so much wrong with that statute. You know, I can't imagine it surviving, you know, one day of serious judicial review.
And the other
but
thing
isn't Florida the home state of the stand your ground? You can shoot anybody who comes to your door.
It's true.
Law.
I mean, it is, but this is a bit different. You are using a truck as a battering ram because you got to go get more beer and wings, as we were talking earlier. You know, and you know, you've got your Ram 550, you know, diesel powerhouse V20, barreling down the block to freaking knock these people down like bowling pins. So, I don't, it's a little bit different. I mean, someone's coming onto your property and you feel threatened, then, but it's still tough. You can't just go around shooting people that come walking up to your door. I was just delivering the mail, man. Why? You
Florida,
look very
anything's possible,
aggressive with that envelope,
But that's a Florida thing.
Yeah. So I mean, even with stand your ground, it's still very difficult to kind of get away with just blowing someone away for the sake of blowing someone away. It's like an enhanced castle doctrine. We have a castle doctrine in New York State where, if someone breaks in your house, man's house is his man's house is his castle. But you still have a duty, under the castle doctrine to retreat and try to just diffuse the situation before you have to start deploying deadly force, unless you're immediately assailed with deadly force. So, that's kind of doing away with that.
Yeah, and that does break down on race as well. I mean, surely that's only a thing that you can do if you're a white person, and it's not really something that black people could do in this country in any state. I mean, one of the things that struck me about the response today to the court case is, they were like talking about Kyle Rittenhouse. Remember Kyle Rittenhouse, who a few weeks after the initial this George Floyd killing, shot two people died, I think, and he shot them in front of cameras, in front of crowds, and basically was like, I think he was arrested, but he was ultimately carried out of the scene like he was the victim somehow of this thing, and he had shot two people in cold blood with a weapon. And because he's white and a 17-year-old, I guess I don't know, whatever it was at the time, somehow he was treated like, oh, it's okay. He was just reacting to all those dangerous black people out there. And meanwhile, George Floyd is dead under the pressure of a policeman's knee. I mean, there is such a race disparity in terms of what you're saying there, Andrew, about what white people can get away with in America and black people can get away with.
Believe it or not, well, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's so much evidence to that effect. I think Kyle Rittenhouse actually shot white people, believe it or not. People that were. I mean, not that it matters. Yeah. Person is a person. You blow them away. In that matter, you're a violent felon and you need to answer for that. But yeah, I mean, Ellie sees this kid walking around with his AR. His mom just dropped him off like from school, like with his little lunch bag or whatever, with his backpack and his books, to the protest from Illinois, and he's walking around and then he gets himself into trouble. And then he's in a position where he needs, wrongfully deploy his weapon, and he blows someone's body part off. I think initially, it's just crazy. It's why are we here? I mean, like, why is stupid garbage like this happening?
We should just blame Ron DeSantis for everything. I think it'll be the way to go from now on.
It's the same. It's the same type of vein.
Yeah, it is very similar.
And it's that, can I just make a quick point? It's back to that thing where somehow these weapons have become acceptable in our society. I lived a half an hour from Sandy Hook. The mom who was the first victim of Sandy Hook, who was the mom of the shooter, bought her son that weapon, the same kind that Kyle Rittenhouse had and every other mass shooter has, to bond with him. He was like special needs and like had some issues, and she wanted to bond with her son. So she thought it would be a good idea to buy him this weapon. And that's the new thing that's here in our society that would be like, when I was a troubled kid, if I was like, hey, I think I need an assault rifle now to help me out of these teen years where I'm acting out, my family would like slap me upside the head. Like, what are you, nuts? Like, that's not happening. But
how
like,
let's go fishing,
Right, exactly. How about like Outward
ducks
Bound?
Or something?
Yeah, we're going to drop you off on an island outside of Maine and give you a fish hook, and a match and see if you come back. Like now it's like, like Andrew said, Kyle Rittenhouse's mom did drive him there with his gun and his survival kit. And he did shoot two people and blew off someone's hand, and the cops handed him a bottle of water and thanked him for coming. He only got arrested the next day.
Yeah.
When it was like, oh, we're going to have to come and get you, He
was there under escort of the police. I mean, he was basically helping them out, doing whatever paramedic stuff they needed him to do, even though he was not a paramedic. Nina's been on before, and she's done this name and shame thing. I don't have as exciting a graphic look this time. But I'm excited about what we're going to do in terms of name and shame, because there was a good report came out this week about the companies that are actually helping all these voter suppression laws come to life by supporting all the politicians, all the lawmakers in these state houses to run their political careers and by funding them. And it's kind of interesting who the top 10 funders are of all these state lawmakers who are passing all these voter suppression laws, which is a bit of a tangent, but it is obviously related to what we've been talking about. So Nina, I don't have the list. I'm going to pull it up quickly because I'm sure you don't have it in front of you.
I'm looking at it.
Oh,
It's
okay,
Public
good.
Citizen. Public Citizen is one of those great, good government groups that does all this research. It's not my research; it's theirs. And they released this report pointing out that contributions from corporations since 2015 have totaled $50 million to state legislators supporting voter suppression bills, including 22 million during the 2020 election cycle. So, the thing is that, you got to think about this. These corporations love to play the diversity game. They love to talk the talk. But when it comes down to walking the walk with the money, they are not doing what they are, what they're pretending to be. Okay, they're not
Publicly,
doing
they're
it all.
saying one thing,
So
and then privately,
AT&T has given the most to the state
I was going to
legislators,
count down from
followed by
10 to 1. I
Altria.
was going to count down from 10 to 1. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, countdown from 10 to 1. So you're
the
starting
the
from
Koch brothers are number 10, and then
which is surprising, right? You would think the Koch brothers would be right up there because Kochs are behind ALEC, the cookie cutter right winger state legislator statute machine.
Look, they put $132 million in there, which is actually quite high. I mean, they were lower on the 2015 to 2020 count, but on the first column there, which is what they put in for last year, 132 million is actually even higher than that. So even though they ranked 10 because of that 2015 to 2020 number.
Oh, wait, are you sure that's million? Are you absolutely sure that's million?
Maybe I'm not sure it's millions. What would it be? Thousands?
I don't think so.
It's thousands,
oh my God.
Thousands.
I don't think that's
thousands.
Not to state legislators.
Thousands. I'm sorry. The whole thing is millions.
It's not millions.
Yeah, thousands.
Because
right.
Millions would be holy mackerel.
Yeah, I think there's only about 7 million in total. Yeah, you're right. Then Farmers Insurance is number 9. Can't say much about that. BNSF Rail. I don't even know who that is. Who's BNSF Rail?
They transfer oil and stuff on railways.
That makes sense.
There you go.
The
Fossil fuel.
Pfizer bring you your vaccines, and they bring you your voter suppression laws, it appears, as does State Farm. And then in the bottom end of this, or the top end of this list, Walmart. That's not really that surprising, is it? That Walmart's going to be there. I mean, maybe it should be, but they don't even pretend to be that liberal on the outside. And then there's United Health, Comcast, the owners of MSNBC, amongst many other things, also bringing voter suppression on the other side of their mouth.
That's a good point.
And then Altria, which is Altria. That's the Philip Morris company again. And then number 1 in this list is AT&T. Go figure.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, these are, they make these decisions based on, they're not giving them the money because they want voter suppression. They're giving them the money because they want statutes that are friendly to, probably their litigation, their susceptibility to litigation or tax issues, or, that's what they're giving these right wingers money for. But they happen to just also get, crazy anti-abortion shit and, everything else that goes along with, and the gun stuff, everything else that goes along with supporting the red side of these state legislatures. So those
we
are
have to become a little bit more disciplined about these things. I mean, it seems that everyone's just so easily are funding these Republicans, and their policies suck. But I guess they avoid regulation, I guess, or they get lower taxes in theory, and that's all that
matters. They're just doing actuarial stuff when they look at this. It's not about the community. It's not about society. It's about how much can we keep our bottom line from, making our stockholders unhappy. I mean, that's the problem with this, the system that we've got. That and then they put diversity on as window dressing.
Mm.
But it is good. They've certainly have stepped up with the Georgia stuff. Even the fact that they talk about it is important. But yeah, let's put the wallet where the mouth is, and stop pouring money into especially these state legislators, these state legislatures are, oh my God, they're just nests of corruption. I started in Springfield, but Albany, Ohio, the things that are going on there,
Tallahassee,
what they get away
apparently.
with. Tallahassee, oh man. Oh yes, Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, Noel
Our
was telling
friend
us
Matt.
last
I'm
week.
sure you've done a whole show on him. I missed that. I'm sorry.
It's three good episodes. I'll send you the links. They're great.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, the state legislatures are in a real they're a hotbed of corruption, and yet they are the ones who are now going to decide potentially who the next election is going to be won by, because they've given themselves all these new authorities. Some of these crazy laws allow the legislatures actually to override what the voters have decided. So, voters could decide,
and that's why
we
the
want to be
folks and
Democrats.
everybody else, that's why they focus on them, because they're purchasable.
Yeah.
They're way more purchasable, and for a lot less than your average senator, U.S. senator, right? It's a lot easier to go to this Columbus or Albany and get stuff that you want.
Right. So was today a turning point? Did we feel America turn into the right direction, or was it just kind of had to happen because it was obvious? No. Start with you.
I think it was a bit of a watershed moment. I feel like it was actually a bit of a turning point, because precedent has been set now, and hopefully a chapter has been closed. It's not, and I lose precedent loosely. I know I'm with it, but I'm just saying it's like, there was some redemption from Rodney King, from all these horrible big public cases we've seen in the past. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done. Obviously, we have Ahmaud Arbery's trial coming up. This stuff happens every day. They weren't even going to charge him a year ago. They listed it as a medical event on the Minneapolis police website. It was only public pressure that brought this case in the first place. But this case was like, enough of this. We're sick of this. And everybody took to the streets. And the big difference between this case and cases in the past, if you watch Black Lives Matter in that movement, it was white folks out there in the streets this time too. Barack Obama said that. It's like they're shoulder to shoulder with you now, and that's going to change things, hopefully, and for the better. But I think it did change things.
Andrew?
Yeah. I think it's the beginning of something. I think we need momentum. I think we need to keep it up. I'm a big proponent of everyone, with issues like this, and also especially with elections, just to keep it up, stay involved, vote in every election. Every election counts, from dog catcher to POTUS. It does not matter. If we fall back, if we slide back into a Trumpian type president, or we have more of these types of cases where people go free and the jurors are just not doing their job, or prosecutors aren't putting cases in front of grand juries, so they're not being pressured to do that, we can go back. It's all about how we want to make America better. Okay, how we want to move forward and become, like I always say, a more perfect union. All right, it's a never-ending quest. It's never going to end as long as America exists.
Nina? Well said, by the way, Andrew.
Yeah, that was good.
Thanks.
Nina?
Well, yes, I think it is a turning point. Absolutely. I think the BLM, the summer of protests was a turning point. As you said, whites, people of all ages, colors, were standing shoulder to shoulder against this. And I think that cops, with him going down like that, honestly, what's going on in Minneapolis with the cops is unbelievable.
Yeah.
What they're doing to journalists is
Crazy.
It's insane. The pictures that are coming out of there are so I don't know if those cops are going to look at this and see that one of their fellow men is now handcuffed, walked off the scene into a dungeon. That could maybe make them think twice about how they behave towards people. Hopefully, but I think it is a turning point. It was a turning point as of last summer, and it would have been a very bad turning point if he had been let go. That would have been not good. And so, yeah, it's a turning point. But things just move very slowly. I don't know. I don't know whether this has an effect on police behavior. because that's what it has to be. But I think the cameras, that them wearing cameras or people carrying cameras around has been a huge boon. I mean, imagine what it was like when they didn't have cameras. If this is what's going on with cameras, imagine what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
I
don't
mean, I
even
think
want
there's
to
a real
imagine it.
moment of truth that we've been experiencing with all these cameras and with just the amount of visibility we now have into
It's
how
been
these
said
police
before, but
stations, how these police
it's
operations work. It's really
frightening.
remarkable that we can see all this stuff now. So that's a big deal. That it's really hard to run away from the truth. I hope certainly that people change their behaviors, but I also wonder if we are, still need to be paying a bigger attention to these external forces that might be, amplifying and setting us into these oppositional spaces that are very, very, very difficult for us to get out of in the long term. At the end of the day, we've got an election, in just around the corner, and we're going to want to make sure that Americans feel like they can raise families in America, like that this is still a country that you can raise kids in. And I don't know if people feel like that so much when they see shootings every day and they see, these court cases and these black people getting killed in all these places. We still need to create an environment that's ultimately positive for people to raise their families. I'm not sure we're there yet. I want to make sure that we focus more on that going forward. Now I see Glenn Kirshner just popped in here, and I know, Nina, you've got to run, so I might just flip you guys out. And then I was going to end the show, but we'll have a few minutes with Glenn because here he is. So thanks, Nina. It's great to see you. Thanks very much for joining us. When's your book out, Nina? Your book's out
May 18th. We have many weeks yet to for you to help me promote it.
Happy to promote it all the time.
It's so good.
Thanks,
Thank
Nina.
you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Just like that, Nina becomes Glenn Kirshner. Hi, Glenn.
Hey, Steph, how are you? Hey, guys.
I'm really good.
Hey.
Noel, Andrew. Thanks. We're almost about to wrap up, but you're here. So how awesome is it for you to spend some time with us tonight? I know you're busy. Give us your quick takeaway. I mean, this was we were just saying, is this a watershed moment or is this just a start of something that we need to still get to?
Yeah, I hope that this gets justice trending. And I don't mean trending on social media, right? If we can actually, and I think we have a chance, and I'll talk about why in a minute, but if we could get justice trending in our police departments, in our prosecutors' offices, in our criminal justice system, in our legislatures, in our schools, in our communities, I think we have a chance, maybe a chance that we haven't really had before. I look at a parallel between what I saw in the George Floyd murder prosecution, which I have to say was expertly tried, okay? I can tell you, I tried more than 50 murder cases in the courts of Washington, D.C., including murder-driven RICO cases. I never tried a case as expertly as I just saw that prosecution team try that case. The parallel I see is between the police leadership of the Minneapolis Police Department getting on the stand and breaking the back of one of their own because they were wrong. I am still inspired by Chief Arredondo. He stood up and in a full-throated way, he said, what Derek Chauvin did was wrong. It was excessive. It was unreasonable, and it was deadly force. And he wasn't the only one from the Minneapolis Police Department testifying like that.
And then
I was just on with Joy Reid, and I got to sit and listen to President Biden's comments as we were kind of waiting to come back to the panel. And he said, and I quote, it's time to take head on the racial disparities that exist in policing in a full-throated way. That's where I see the parallel, because what it might take to really get rid of the bad cops is the good cops mobilizing. Because the bad cops make the good cops, it makes their job so much harder, right? Yeah. And I think Chief Arredondo and other, like Lieutenant Zimmerman, the senior most member of the Minneapolis Police Department who testified against Chauvin, they took the stand and they gave the jury permission, because jurors are, like everyday people. They'll look at a use of force video and they'll say, man, that looks wrong. That looks criminal. That looks like murder. It looks like an execution. But I don't know anything about police procedure. I don't know how use of force works. When good officers come in and say, let us tell you how use of force works, it's not what Derek Chauvin did. That was criminal. That may be what it takes. That, together with a president of the United States who, in a full-throated way, says we have racial disparity in policing and it needs to be addressed. Compare that to what Trump said when he was talking to the chiefs of police. He said, don't be so gentle when you put them in the cruiser. Bang your head against the door jamb. I mean, fortunately gone are those days. But if we now have leadership in our police departments, in the executive branch, in our legislatures that are willing to say, we're going to seize the moment and we're going to get justice trending. And now I am supposed to do Zerlina because I'm getting called.
It's okay. Go do it.
That was
Go do it.
great.
Thanks for, you did a great job with
Dude,
us. Thank you so
that
much
was
for
awesome.
dropping in.
Thank you, guys. I'm sorry.
Bravo.
That's
No,
5
that
minute
was
appearance we've
great.
ever had on Narrative. Well done. Thanks very much, Glenn. All right.
Thanks,
good night.
Man,
The man is in demand, but you can
That
see
was
why.
awesome.
He knows his way around a good. What do you say? When you do a closing statement? I guess from that's what you guys, you lawyers do. You fancy lawyers. On that point, you guys want to say anything else? Because we've been a little longer than we normally are. But you guys want to share anything else? Do you want to? I think what Glenn said was phenomenal. I think he's so right about that one thing that was so specifically different about this case was that the police took the stand and they said themselves they were critical of their guy. And that I don't recall in many other cases. That certainly, I mean, Andrew, do you recall anything like that in any of the cases you've
No,
you've been involved in?
and a lot of the civil rights claims that I litigate and prosecute, for people who are victims of police brutality or false arrests or malicious prosecution, anything like that, any rights violations, I have to hire an expert, which is usually a former police officer, to kind of testify on my behalf, because you've got to counter and demonstrate, because you have the burden of proof as the plaintiff, as prosecutors have the burden of proof in a criminal prosecution. You have to demonstrate what was wrong. Where did they violate use of force guidelines? Use of force is on a continuum, and you constantly have to readjust, which clearly Derek Chauvin did not do. You use the amount of force reasonable and necessary to overcome any force that you're facing, and again, you have Derek Chauvin, putting his knee on George Floyd's neck while he's unconscious. So clearly, that's an excessive use of force, which causally led to his death. So that's
yes, I mean that's what makes a huge difference, having the police actually speak up. And I noticed in that case in Brooklyn Center, the police officer who shot that kid last week, she resigned immediately. She sort of accepted the fact that she had just made a stupid mistake or made whatever. And she walked off the job. I mean, she felt it was better for the police force in general that she wasn't there. It felt to me like an attempt, at least, to not try to hide behind the badge or try to hide behind the
contrition and responsibility for her egregious act.
Yeah, exactly, which is what you want from police officers. Well, I guess then it is watershed. We'll call it a watershed from all of that. Gosh, it's heartbreaking to see the family, but they were so overjoyed today at justice. It's remarkable what justice can do for you. That moment of having a jury stand up and say, this man is guilty. This man is guilty of killing your son and your brother, and this is exactly what he deserves. This is what he needs to happen. That is the most cathartic. Not even as cathartic is probably not even the right word, but it's just the most important closure for people to have at the end of this traumatic and epic journey that this family has been through. For them to actually have this moment of like, okay, we can breathe now. We've done our work for George. We've done our work for him, and he can now finally rest in peace because he's got that justice. That is, that is why we have justice. At the end of the day, that's why we do it for the victims, obviously, but we do it for the victims' families as well, because there's so much relief there and so much closure for them that they can let him rest now. And that was so apparent in all their speeches earlier on. And I thought that was the most powerful thing. Can't imagine what it's like to have lost your son, lost your brother, and then have a courtroom turn around and say, that man who murdered your son is free to go. Can't imagine what that feels like. So this is why we need justice, and this is why it's important that we have this radical change. And if President Biden is behind it, how much bigger a difference is that going to make going forward? All right, gentlemen, I think we have to wrap it up. Interesting show. Thank you so much for being here, Andrew. Thank you so much for being here, Noel. And do you want to say anything before we go, Noel? I've sort of been yakking a little bit.
No, I mean, these two gentlemen just said it all.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they have scales in justice, right? Is because you're trying to balance it out. And I think
That's right.
as a nation, we learned today it feels good to do the right thing. You know, it feels good to not have a conflicted thing that you have to make excuses for. You know, setting the record right is a new chapter. And I think people will find that it feels good. And like Glenn said, you know, cops are coming forward now in a way they haven't before. And that's going to make all the difference.
It really will. Yeah, 100%. Glenn hit it right on the head.
Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight on a special edition of Narrative Live. We'll be back on Friday with the after show, and we look forward to seeing you then. Have a good night, everybody. Good night.
You too, Zev. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Narrative is funded by viewers like you. Support our independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative.